She was still leaking milk when they found her bleeding by the roadside. The heat shimmered over the asphalt outside Scottsdale, Arizona. It was midday. Traffic hummed in the distance, but the stretch of road near the desert brush lay quiet until a delivery driver noticed something motionless at Thess Holder. A tangle of fur, dust, android blood. He slowed, squinting. Ridido dismissed it as another coyote hit by Akar. But when he stepped out, his breath caught. It was a bobcat, female alive. Her ribs showed through her flanks, her paws raw, blood-crusted. Along her hind legs, she didn't flinch, didn't move, didn't growl. Her golden eyes fixed on him with something beyond pain and something that looked like surrender. Rescue was called. A local wildlife team arrived, circling her with quiet urgency. Wrong move, and she could lung, but she didn't. Instead, as they approached, she exhaled one long, shallow breath and lowered her head into the dirt. They placed her on a stretcher, her body limp but warm. It wasn't until the medic touched her belly that he froze. Guys, she's lactating. Underneath the wounds, her body told a different story, one of life, not death. Her nipples were swollen, the fur around them soaked. She'd been feeding baby certainly. Her milk hadn't dried up. It was still coming. She had cubs in Thebek of the wildlife transport van. Like silence settled heavy. No one spoke as they looked out at the endless stretch-off desert behind them. Somewhere out there in the heat and silence, her litter could still be waiting. Or they were already gone. At the wildlife rehab center, they carried her into the emergency bay. Breathing washallow, pulse faint. A gash across her left flank hinted at a predator encounter. Maybe a fight. Maybe a fall. She wasn't just injured. She was grieving. She didn't lift her head for hours. The team worked in near silence, cleaning wounds, inserting IVs, monitoring vitals. The lead vet, Dr. Hayes, spoke quietly, as if not toasted her spirit out of her body. No defensive behavior. No fight left. That's not survival instinct. That's mourning. They placed her in a private enclosure. She curled into the far Thess corner, pressed her head against Thruel, and stayed that way. No snarling, no movement, just stillness, as if turning away from the world. They named her Luna. No one dared to ask the obvious question aloud. But it lingered, but when them seemed like smoke. Where were her babies? The moment Luna's body touched the rehab table, the room full-lento, a rhythm of silent panic. Glove snapped on, fluids were hung. Selena peshed through trembling veins. Her breathing was shallow but steady, her body dangerously cold. Her coat, on Sethic and golden with that wild desertine, was matted with dried blood and patches of burrs. She weighed half off Hut, a healthy bobcat her age should. The team worked quickly, but their eyes betrayed them. Haunted glances passed from one face to another as more of her injuries came to light. Deep lacerations, longer haunch, bruising around hair ribs, torn pads on all four paws. Thepids told them more than the wounds. She had been running for miles on burning asphalt and sharp stone, and she had stopped. Her mammary glands were inflamed. Hot to the touch, some crocodile bleeding, yet milk still wept from them in thin threads. The fluids of Amather, who had never meant to leave Haryong, a mother whose body refused to give up, even if her spirit already had. They placed her in a quiet enclosure. Far from the noise of the other animals, the room was cool, soft towels lined. Theffler. But Luna didn't respond. Uprose herself into the corner. Her back curved like a question mark. Fastened her into the wall. She didn't hiss, didn't growl, she didn't even blink when Thien entered. Food was left untouched, not a sniff, not a glance. Her breath in agreement low and deliberate. Almost like was forcing herself to stay alive, though every part of her had already left. A desert ghost, a heartbeat with no anchor. Outside, volunteers returned to the roadside area where Luna had been found. Armed with binoculars, thermal drones, and a single desperate hope, they searched for her cubs. They scoured every patch of brush, every hollow-eyed log, every shaded gully where a mother might hide her litter. For hours, they combed the terrain in brutal heat, calling out softly into the wild zealants. Nothing. No cries, no movement, no tiny prints. In the dust, but near a cluster of palvery trees, one volunteer sputted something in the sand. Scuffle mark, claw tracks, dried blood, coyote prints, and a trail that ended abruptly. Back at the center, Luna still hadn't moved. A volunteer whispered what no one else wanted to say. She's not injured. She's grieving herself to death. They didn't speak of hope. They didn't talk off survival. The team only watched, waited, sat with her in silence. Sami then cried. They didn't cry for Theblood or the wounds. They cried because Athea saw it in her eyes. She'd lost something she was never supposed to live without. They feared she'd lost them all. Days passed. Luna didn't move. Not when they refreshed her water. Not when Thabit entered with soft footsteps and a lowered voice. Not when the sun shifted through the skylight, casting gold across her unmoving body. She remained curled into herself, her face pressed tough wall of her enclosure as if the scent of her cubs might still linger there, hiding in the cold stone. She didn't sleep. Not fully, not deeply. Her ears twitched sometimes, reflexes, but her eyes stayed open, hollow, waiting, hoping, refusing. At night the silence off, the center grew thick. Around her, Anthan, in the hours before dawn, Thestov began to hear it. A sound like a sob, soft, hollow animal. A low, rasping cry. At first they thought it was Thuend, then perhaps another injured animal, but it was her, Luna, Kalanginto, the dark. Not a growl, not a snarl, something more fragile, something more human. The staff began whispering a bootit in the hallways, unable to look each other in the eye. They called it Thueld grief, and it echoed. Across the hall, in a dimly lit room with heating pads and bottles and warm towels, another form of grief was unfolding. For Labrador Retriever puppies, no older than 2 weeks, had been dumped in a cardboard box behind a grocery store just outside Phoenix. No mother, no note, just whimpers and hunger. They were found by a story employee during a late trash run. Shivering and shrieking in the dark, their umbilical cords were still drying. Flies already circled the corners of the box now. The puppies lay in an incubator land, with soft cloth and plastic bottles. Volunteers worked around that clock, feeding every 2 hours.
Rubbing tinny bellies to stimulate digestion, checking temperatures, rotating positions, so none would flatten.
But Thepapis cried constantly, not from pain, from absence, from something no human could provide. Their tiny paws reached out for warmth, for heartbeat, for fur, for a mother. No matter how tender the care, the silence between fittings rend full of need, and the staff knew some puppies didn't survive long without the presence of a mother. Not just food, presence, skin, sound, love. So 2 rooms held 2 different griefs. One primal, one newborn. Both impossiblado, fixed with medicine. One corner, a wild cat who had lost her reason to eat. In another, a litter of orphans who hadn't a mother to call. They existed on opposite ends of the hallway, separated each species, fate, and pain. But every night, as Luna cried into the dark, Thepapis cried. 2, their voices rising like a duet no one had written. Just instinct and absence pulling sound from tiny lungs and a broken heart. Both mother and puppies were grieving what they'd lost. It had been nearly a week since Luna arrived. Each day passed in a haze of quiet heartbreak. She hadn't tightened. Lifted her head, the team rotated in and out, offering water, soft words, space. But nothing reached her. She kept her face pressed to the corner of her enclosure like she was waiting for something that wasn't coming. On the 6th morning, Dr. Hayes lingered outside her room longer than usual. Avalantia was bottle-feeding the Labradorpies just down the corridor, their tinny voices rising and falling in faith-hyped, desperate cry, the kin that cuts through walls. That's when she saw it. A twitch, just the slight flick of Luna's ear, then her shoulder shifted, her spine stretched. The sound came again. One of the puppies let out a lonely, cracking yelp. Dr. Hayes held her breath. Luna turned her head. It was low, as if waking from underwater. But she turned. For the first time since Siraving, her face wasn't toward Thruel. Her eyes locked on the door and her ears, both of them, stood tall. "Bring them closer," the doctor said, her voice barely above a whisper. The team hesitated. They knew the risk. These were orphaned domestic puppies, fragile and blind. Luna was a wild bobcat, unpredictable, grieving, silent, but something deeper than fear pushed them forward. They brought the box to the hallway just outside Luna's enclosure. 4 tiny Labrador Retriever puppies bundled in a warm towel still chew. Young, to open their eyes, wriggled restlessly, crying out in short, broken pleas. Luna stood. Her legs trembled beneath her, muscles thin from fasting. She moved slowly, deliberately, like something ancient had stirred inside her. She walked to the front of her enclosure and pressed her nose low to the bars. The crying stopped. The puppies shifted, their tiny bodies relaxing. One even pushed closer to the edge of the box, nose lifted as if reaching for her scent. Luna didn't move again. She stood frozen for a long moment, then slowly lowered herself to the floor. Curling her body along Thebers, close enough to feel their warmth, close enough to be felt. She closed her eyes. There were no growls, no warning signs, just silence and breath, and something invisible beginning to mend. No one spoke. She'd made to move. She'd made a choice. They waited until the next morning. The team barely slept the night before. Everyone was wange, unsure of what they had witnessed, but the image of a wild bobcat for orphan Labrador puppies, separated only by iron bars, haunted them in the best way. It didn't make sense. It wasn't logical, but it was real. Luna hadn't moved all night. She remained pressed against the enclosure wall, her body facing the box, her breath calm and steady. When the puppy cried, she lifted her head. When they whimpered in sleep, she shifted closer. Something had changed. Dr. Hayes stood in the corridor at dawn, watching her through the glass. "She's not reacting like a predator," she whispered. "She's reacting like amateur." No one wanted to be the first to suggest it. But they all felt the pull. They brought one puppy forward. A volunteer, hands trembling, scooped up the small stuff, the litter. A pale golden pup, eyes still closed, belly round from formula. He whimpered as he was carried down the hallway, his cries echoing softly. Luna was already at the bars, standing now, alert, ears up. The volunteer crouched low and gently set the puppy on a folded towel just outside Luna's enclosure a few inches from the gate. Luna didn't pounce. She didn't snarl. She lowered her head and sniffed slow and deep. Her eyes softened. Then she did something no one was prepared for. She licked him once, then again a long sweeping motion across his back, just like a mother would. The puppy squirmed, let out a satisfied squeak, and wriggled closer to the source of warmth. Luna responded instantly, her paw extended, not with claws but soft and steady. Shay hooked the towel gently and pulled it toward the bars, toward her Sfey. The room froze. "She's pulling him in," someone whispered. The vet reached the gate just in time, lifted the latch slowly, and placed the puppy into Luna's enclosure. Just inside Theodore, still within reach if anything went wrong. Everyone held their breath. Luna curled around him, her body curved instinctively, tail wrapping over his side, and like a miracle stitched into muscle memory, she positioned him against her belly. The puppy routed, latched, and fed. Anslow, her eyes closed, and the room filled with the faintest, softest sound known of them had heard until now. Shepherd. It wasn't loud. It wasn't even steady, but it was there from a body that had been silent, grieving, waiting to die. It was the sound of a mother, not a predator. One by one, they brought other puppies to her carefully, gently, with reverent silence. She welcomed them all, cleaned them, cradled them, made no biological sense. Boutet made something else, made life. She wasn't grieving anymore. She was mothering again. From that moment on, everything changed. The sterile, quiet, off-wildlife center gave way to something warmer, softer. A rhythm, slow but certain. Every few hours, the team brought Luna her new family. For squirming Labrador puppies, still blind, still helpless, still reaching for her warmth. and every time Luna accepted them as if they'd Aloisined hers. She didn't just tolerate her presence, she craved it. She curled her body around them with the precision of instinct. She cleaned their rears, their paws, their soft round bellies. She nudged them into place with her nose when they grew restless. When Thea cried, she responded with quiet, deliberate purr, wrapping her limbs protectively around the pile of fur and breath. And when one wandered too far, she pulled him back, gently but firmly, pressing him to her chest. The Vedics begged to weep openly. There were no explanations to offer, no science to back it, just the silent, overwhelming power of what they were witnessing. Wild predator, mothering a litter, off domestic puppies as if her body had waited for them all along. Volunteers, filmed with shaking hands, they couldn't help it. Their wasoming sacred in the sight of a bobcat, licking the muzzle of a whimpering puppy, the way her eyes tracked every movement like she'd was counting them. One clip, 30 seconds long, captured Luna placing a paw over Two's sleeping pups, while the others fed. It was uploaded that evening with caption, "The Wild Mother." It's Bimmerning. It had nearly 4 million views. Donations poured in. Comments flooded the page. "I've never cried like this. This changed how I see wildlife forever." She didn't just survive, she chose love. The staff knew Luna needed more than a temporary enclosure. So, they cleared out a quiet room at the end of the hall. Soft lighting, no glass walls, no concrete floors. They lined it with blankets, natural textures, dim corners, a home. It became her den. There she lay curled around her new family, day and night. She'd never strayed more than a few feet from them. She ate only when they slept. She watched them breathe like Asentinel. It didn't matter that their species didn't match. It didn't matter that none of it made sense. She hadn't replaced her cubs. She hadn't forgotten them. But in that quiet room, she found something that allowed her to keep going. She'd lost her own, but she found some into love. The puppies were growing fast. Their eyes opened one by one, revealing soft pools of blue that blinked toward the light for the first time. Wobbly legs found balance. Tiny tails began to wag. They yipped, tumbled, chewed each other's ears. Unenthralled all, Luna stayed near, watching, waiting, loving. She no longer pressed herself to the wall. She no longer trembled at sounds. Her ribs slowly vanished beneath a softening glare of healthy weight. Her fur, unsapachi and dull, began to shine again. The rich gold of her coat returned, brushing back into place with each careful grooming. But it was her eyes that changed most. They were no longer hollow, no longer distant. They followed each puppy with razor focus and quiet tenderness. When one got too far, she herded him back. When another cried, she responded before the humans even stood up. Luna didn't sleep deeply. No Tanamore. She dozed with ears twitching, alert. To every breath, every whimper, and when the puppies climbed on top of her, she didn't resist. She let them tug her ears, chew her tail, and nestle into her side like living puzzle pieces that somehow fit. One morning, a volunteer captured a clip of all 4 puppies calmly climbing onto Luna's back. She lay, still patient, regal, while they turned her into their personal jungle gym. The moment was pure, absurd, heart-shattering in its simplicity. The video exploded online. 10 million views in 4 days. News outlets picked it up. Animal behaviorists debated it. People from around the country reached out, wanting to donate, to visit, to adopt, to understand. That same week, the Wildlife Tour received a major donation from Shui, enough to fund a full expansion off the nursery and enrichment wing. They asked how to label the room that had come Luna's sanctuary. There was only one answer: Luna's den. They hung a wooden sign above the door, hand carved on simple inside. The bobcat lay curled on a beat-off blankets, puppies nestled against her chest, breathing in sync with hers. She hadn't just survived. She had chosen to live. She had chosen to love. She wasn't just healing. She was giving life. Luna's bond with the puppies had grown into something no one could fully explain. It wasn't just care. It was devotion. She'd memorized every yip, every sleepy whimper, every cento-fevery pup that curled against her. and that instinct didn't stop what the force had raised from the box. As weeks passed, the wildlife center took in orphans, fox kits, raccoon cubs, even a litter of abandoned kittens. Some were too young to be alone. Others were sick, weak, on the edge of fading. They needed more than formula. They needed presence. They needed warmth. So the team treated something that once would have sounded unthinkable. They brought one off. Motherless kittens near Luna's enclosure. She didn't blink, just watched. Her ears rose, her eyes calm. The kitten cried, soft and broken. Luna responded with the same stillness. She gave the puppies. Watchful open. It was like a door inside her had never closed. Soon, the team began rotating other fragile animals near her during supervised moments. Always careful, always measured. Each time, Lunar expanded with quiet acceptance. Body, a wall of comfort, her breath a fluid. But one night something shifted again. One of her own, one of the original puppies, the smallest, fell ill. Sudden fever, rapid breathing, lethargy. The vet team acted fast. Fluids, heat packs, soft wraps. They set up his bidding just beside Luna's. Resting space, careful not to crowd her. Luna didn't wait. She rose from her corner and lay down right next to him. No coaxing, no hesitation. She pressed her side gently against his and stayed there for hours. She didn't move, didn't eat, barely blinked. The room darkened. The center fell quiet. Luna remained a living blanket. Curled around, a fading heartbeat like her own body might keep it beating. By morning, the fever had broken. The puppy opened his eyes. He wobbled forward on shaky paws, barely able to lift his head. But Henyu, where to go? He crawled straight in tow. The warmth of her chest and nuzzled into her chin. Luna leaned down and with one slow, deliberate motion, licked his nose. She didn't need to be thanked. She only needed to know he was safe. Shebakam, the heartbeat of the nursery. The days grew warmer. Luna and the puppies' wear moved to a new space on the edge off center grounds. Quiet enclosure with soft sand underfoot, shaded trees weighing above. In a covered shelter where she could curl with the little ones and still feel the open air. Wassifer, more natural, a place made for peace. The enclosure gave her room to roam, but not too far. Just enough to stretch, to perch on Thero's platforms. To watch the sky change, she liked the breeze on her face. But more than that, she liked the sound of small paws behind her. The Puppies, now nearly 2 months old, were bolder, louder, always tumbling, always hissing. But she never let them stray far. Even with freedom, Luna stayed close, always watching, always listening, always counting them. Then came the storm. It swept in late one night, unexpected, violent, the Kindoff desert rain that slams against Thurov like fists. Wind howled through. Theteries. I had rattling branches and lifting dust into the air. Somewhere in Irby, lightning cracked open the sky, and then darkness. The power blinked out across the building. Lights gone, cameras dead. Only the emergency backup system kept the vital enclosure shaming. The hallway outside Luna's den fell silent. Around 3 a.m., the night security guard walked his usual route, flashlight in hand. He checked doors, peeked through windows, noted supplies, but as he turned the corner toward Luna's area, something made him stop. A low sound, sharp, guttural, a growl. Hess stepped closer, heart pounding. Then he saw it. 8 to Luna's enclosure. Had been nudged open just enough to slip through. Oh. The storm must have dislodged the latch. And inside, illuminated by the dim beam of his flashlight, was a scene that froze him in place. Luna stood low to the ground, her ears flat, her body coiled in front of 3 huddled puppies. Her shoulders were tense, her breath fast, and her throat trembled with a sound that didn't belong in any nursery. Across from her, not more than 6 feet away, a raccoon crouched, eyes glowing, body tense, cornered, and willed. It had slipped in through the open vent in the storm, drawn by scent, by warmth, by hunger, but it hadn't accounted for her. Luna didn't move. She didn't attack. She simply stood her ground. Between danger and her children, Hans, a living shield of muscle and instinct. The raccoon froze, unsure. Then, after what felt like forever, he turned and scurried toward the open door, vanishing into the dark. The guard stepped inside. Luna turned her head just slightly, her eyes locked on his, clear, focused, unblinking. And then shuddered back to the puppies, lowered herself over them, and exhaled. They wriggled beneath her. She didn't budge. She didn't sleep the rest of the night. The storm passed. The power returned. The danger was gone, but Luna had prevented something the world already suspected. She'd lost once. She would never lose again. The puppies thrived. What began for fragile bodies trembling in ackerboard box had become a whirlwind of strength and life. Their legs were sturdy now, their paws too big for their frames. Their eyes bright and eager. They chased insects in the sand, wrestled one another into soft blankets, and returned always to the steady warmth of the one who raised them.
Ow.
Them, groomed them, protected them, and when they no longer needed milk, she remained their compass. She taught them calm. She taught them boundaries. She taught them presence. But time moves forward, even in sanctuaries. At 12 weeks, the puppies were ready, healthy, strong, vaccinated. Each had been matched with a loving home, carefully chosen by the center. With families who had followed their journey from the beginning, people who understood who they were and who had raised them. On the morning of their departure, the staff brought them to Luna one last time. She was lying beneath the shade of her favorite tree, the open-air enclosure. The wind stirred gently through the leaves. As volunteers approached, Luna lifted her head slowly, knowingly. One by one, they set the puppies beside her. Shouldn't flinch. She leaned in and sniffed up one, softly, deeply. A slow pass over the ear. A nudge beneath the chin. She lay beside them, her body curled in the shape it had always taken. Protective, grounded, whole. There was it. No grief in her breath now, no panic. Only peace. When they were lead away, carried toward new beginnings. She didn't cry. She didn't follow. Should blinked. She breathed. And then she turned toward the trees, toward quiet, toward whatever came next. Luna would not return to the wild. Too much trust had been built. Too much a fair world had changed. Releasing her now would mean abandoning her all over again. So she stayed. The center built her, a permanent space twice the size of last with shaded dens. Natural perches, and the scent of pine drifting in the wind. Every spring when orphan edliters arrived, abandoned foxes, trembling kittens, motherless pups, they brought them to Luna, carefully, slowly, and every time she made the same choice, she'd nudge them close, curl her body around them, breathe warmth. Into their fragile frames, she'd become more to a rescue story, more than a survivor. She was the center symbol, its shirtbeat, its mother. She was born willed, but love made her stay. Every story here on Hope and Fur reminds you about the incredible power of compassion and how crucial it is to support animals in need. When you watch and share these stories, you're helping more rescued animals find the love, care, and homes they deserve. Luna didn't ask to become your mother again. She didn't choose grief. She didn't choose loss. But when life handed her brokenness, she answered with something stronger. She chose to protect, to nurture, to give. What she did was more than survival. It was a form of healing that no medicine can offer. Her journey reminds us that love doesn't need a match in species, only a match in need. And in that moment, when a wild bobcat killed herself around abandoned puppies, she wasn't thinking about rules or instincts, only about presence, safety, connection. This animal's journey from rescue to rehabilitation shows just how important non-pet rescue groups really are. Caring for rescued animals is more than love. It's responsibility, animal welfare, and wildlife conservation.
I say.
When you see a story like Luna's, let it move you. Let it remind you what kindness can do, and let it live beyond just this moment. Because the more we share, the more we protect. The more Wecker, the more we save. Join us at Hope and Fur, where every story becomes a voice and every voice becomes hope.